Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. India is voting in the world's biggest election. 4 phases done, 3 more to go. Of late, the focus has been on the stock market. The Sensex is swinging and some pundits are attributing it to poll jitters. Are investors worried about the election result in India, or are these trends exaggerated? 2 top union ministers have weighed in. We'll bring you the numbers and what they mean. In China, foreign direct investment, or FDI, has fallen by 56% despite Xi Jinping's outreach to big businesses. We will tell you why. In the US, Donald Trump leads Joe Biden in swing states. These are opinion polls. We'll tell you why the trend is significant. What is OpenAI's new offering, Chat GPT 4o, an AI assistant that flirts? Why and how is NASA planning to build railway lines on the moon? What's happening in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, a political tug-of-war after days of protest? A day after a billboard tragedy, why is the spirit of Mumbai trending? Why have anti-France protests rocked the Pacific island of New Caledonia? Why is Paris telling its men to drive like women? And what's shrinkonomics, the economic cost of a shrinking population? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Georgia's parliament approves the Foreign Agents Bill. The controversial law was passed despite weeks of mass protests. Critics say it's similar to repressive Russian legislation used to silence dissent. The European Union has warned Georgia that this undermines their bid to join the bloc. Protests in Armenia as well. Dozens of demonstrators detained in the capital, Yerevan. Protests have been ongoing against the government plans to concede land to arch-enemy Azerbaijan. Protest leaders call for the Prime Minister's impeachment. In India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi files his nomination from Varanasi amid a massive show of strength. Prime Minister Modi first contested from Varanasi in 2014. He is seeking a historic 3rd consecutive term. Voting will take place in Varanasi on the 1st of June in the last phase of the general election. Russian President Vladimir Putin will visit China this week. It will be Putin's first trip abroad since his re-election in March. Beijing is a crucial economic partner for Moscow, which is facing Western sanctions over the Ukraine war. This will be Putin's 2nd trip to China in just over 6 months. And the top court of the United Nations to hold hearings on Israel's Rafah offensive this week. South Africa has urged the UN to impose emergency orders on Israel to halt its operation in Rafah. In recent days, nearly 500,000 Palestinians have been displaced. What's the best way to gauge an election? Maybe talk to the voters or conduct an opinion poll. These are the conventional options. But in India, there seems to be a new election pundit, the stock market. Now, markets do not have a favorite political party, but they do like 2 things: policy continuity and political stability. That's what stock markets want. Until now, nobody really gave much attention to the markets. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his party, the BJP, were widely expected to win, so the assumption was that the markets would boom. We've now completed 4 phases of voting and suddenly the markets are in the news, not because of the boom, but because of a sudden fall. Let's look at India's Sensex. Since the start of May, it has lost 1,500 points. The index is more than 2% down. Same with the Nifty. It has lost more than 400 points. Again, that's almost 2% down. So what's the deal here? Should you be worried about the Indian stock markets? Is there a political message here? The government says no. 2 central ministers have addressed this issue, Home Minister Amit Shah and External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. Both of them played down this market dip. Listen in.
I think to me, it's very clear where the election is going. The exact number people may have a debate. In democracy, they should be debating it also. But I am very sure as round after round takes place, markets will be less and less volatile. because the markets will see exactly what those numbers, or will get a sense of, where those numbers will end up. And I'm very confident those numbers will end up very, very good for us.
Home Minister Amit Shah went one step further. He said, buy up stocks before June 4th because after the elections, they will shoot up. Well, let's keep the poll rhetoric aside. What could be driving the markets down? Does it have something to do with the elections? There are three factors at play here. First and most important, Indian stocks are already overvalued. What does that mean? It means the stock price is too high, the profits and outlook do not justify the price. Look at this report by Kotak Equities. It said Indian markets were overvalued across sectors. Only large cap shares were fine. The rest, around 90%, were overvalued. But inflated values do not last. Eventually, investors see the hype, so they book their profits and leave. When that happens, the markets crash. Which brings us to the second factor. A lot of foreign investors are leaving. They took out $2 billion in the last week. Compare that to April. In the whole of April, they took out just 1.9 billion. So 2 billion in 1 week and 1.9 billion in 1 month. You can see why the trajectory is bad. So where are these investors going? Well, money chases returns, and right now some markets are outperforming India. Japan, for instance, is doing quite well. So are markets in Southeast Asia. In fact, even Western markets are rebounding. In the US, Dow Jones is up 4.5%. In the UK, FTSE is up 5.7%. So the broad picture is quite clear. Foreign investors have booked their profits in India. They feel the markets are a bit volatile, so they're looking elsewhere. When they leave, they suck money out of the market. Less money equals less investment. Less investments equals lower prices. And finally, we come to the third reason. Poll jitters. The markets were prepared for a Modi victory. We had 5 state elections in November last year. The BJP won 3 of them, so the public opinion was quite clear. Prime Minister Modi would return for a third term. The campaign also reflected that confidence. The party slogan was 400 par, meaning more than 400 seats. But then came the voting and the turnout was low. 66.14% in phase 1, 66.71% in phase 2, 65.68% in phase 3 and 67.7% in phase 4. Compare this to the last elections. In 2014, the turnout was 66.6%. In 2019, it was 67.4%. I know the difference looks negligible, but remember, India has almost 1 billion voters. So even 0.1% is tens of thousands of votes. Now the question is, what does this low turnout mean? And frankly, no one is sure. Some say it could signal fatigue with the BJP or overconfidence of their supporters or just the heat wave in some parts of the country. Now, just to be clear, the markets do not have some inside information. They don't know who is winning any better than you and I do. They react to what they see. And what do they see now? A lot of chatter about the BJP losing momentum and a lot of press coverage about the turnout. Now, markets are not reacting to facts on the ground. They're reacting to perceptions. So, judging elections based on markets is quite risky. Chances are it's more about the financial side of things, like overvaluation and investor exodus. As for the elections, maybe let's stick to horses for courses. You wouldn't decide poll results based on GDP, would you? So why judge elections based on the markets? Meanwhile, China is unable to turn its fortunes. The bad news continues to trickle in. Foreign investment in China continues to plummet. In the first 3 months of 2024, FDI in China dropped by 56%. That's foreign direct investment, 56% down. From January to March this year, China received just a little over $10 billion as FDI. This is a new low for the world's second largest economy. Although experts say they saw this coming. The signs of weakness were visible last year as well. And how much FDI did China get in 2023? Just $33 billion. Their lowest amount in 30 years. Seems like in the first quarter of 2024, China's situation has not improved. And this is despite Xi Jinping's personal efforts. He tried to win over foreign investors in March. He met with top American business leaders. Beijing did not really reveal what Xi Jinping told them, but he is believed to have indicated that he is listening to the business community and that he appreciates their challenges. It hasn't helped though. They don't seem to be convinced. Because China suffers a serious trust deficit. Investors do not trust it. America has sanctioned it. And now Europe is planning to act on Chinese imports. They want to impose more tariffs on Chinese goods.
I don't think anyone really is a fan of tariffs and probes and investigations. But it's a consequence of things being at a place where they're not supposed to be. We're going to see many more unless we find a way to talk about these things that are seen as being out of balance.
It's not just about the trade tensions. Investors have another problem with China. They do not feel safe there. Last year, China revised its anti-espionage law. The changes were broad and sweeping. It turned foreign businesses into targets for scrutiny. If you're a foreign worker in China and Chinese authorities find your activities suspicious, they could start investigating. If you're a Chinese worker and you work with a foreigner, the consequences could be even more serious. And these are not one-off cases. China has turned it into a mass campaign. Take a look at this. It's a poster promoting a hotline. It was put up on public transport across China. And what does the poster say? It carries a message for Chinese citizens. If they suspect someone in their community of being a spy, they can simply dial this number and lodge a complaint. China would come after them with full force of the law. Basically, snitch on your neighbor or anyone for that matter, and they're done for. This law has had a chilling effect on businesses. Last year, China raided a number of foreign firms, including consultancy firms like Capvision and Bain. Employees from a company called Mintz were detained. Mintz is an American due diligence firm. Even Japanese companies were targeted. In 2023, employees of drug maker Astellas were detained. And this crackdown is driving businesses away. Some companies have stopped operating in China. I'm talking about names like Forrester Research, the Vanguard Group, and Gallup. Last year, they closed all their offices in China. So it's not just about the money, it's also about the atmosphere. Investors are not optimistic about China. They feel it's risky, both for their business and for their employees. So they're pulling back. What can Beijing do to reverse the trend? Can it reverse the trend? Looks tough at the moment. The International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, has offered suggestions. They say China should make major policy changes to regain trust.
The first opportunity is to raise productivity and rebalance the economy away from investment and towards more consumption-driven growth that is more durable, less reliant on debt, and will also help address climate challenges.
But Beijing seems to be ignoring the experts and doing what it does best, cover up the facts and manipulate data. Look at this report from last evening. China has restricted access to live trading data of foreign investors at the Hong Kong exchange. So now, when foreign investors buy and sell shares at this exchange, the live data of their trade will not be accessible. What does Beijing hope to achieve with this? You see, live data helps traders in making real-time decisions. When they see foreign investors selling their Chinese shares, and that too in large volumes, they can react as well. Some of them can choose to sell their holdings, and this could lead to mass sell-offs. And that is what China is trying to avoid. So it is blocking access to data. Since the pandemic, foreign investors have been fleeing the Hong Kong markets. Together, Chinese and Hong Kong shares have lost almost $5 trillion in value, $5 trillion in just the last 3 years. In January alone, stocks listed in Hong Kong were trading at a discount of 36%. China has been trying to prop up its markets and shore up foreign investment. But at this rate, it's turning into a losing battle. People say every vote counts, and on paper, yes, it does. But in the United States, some votes are more important than others. I'm talking about battleground states, also known as swing states. These are not Republican or Democrat. They swing from one election to the next. You win these states, you win the White House. That's how it works. And how many such states are there? 6 of them. And Donald Trump is leading in 5. In Pennsylvania, he leads by 3 points. In Arizona, 7 points. Michigan, 7. Georgia, 10. And Nevada, 12. Joe Biden leads only in one swing state, and that is Wisconsin. He has a 2-point lead. Now, the president's campaign has rejected these polls. They say they're inconsistent. They also point to other polls that show Biden in the lead. I guess politicians are the same everywhere. But Biden cannot ignore the numbers. In the 2020 election, he won these 6 states. That's how he beat Donald Trump. But his winning margin was quite low, around 300,000 votes. That's it. 3 lakh votes spread across 6 states. So Trump is quite confident. He thinks he can overturn this deficit. And Trump has 2 things working for him. First, his trial is not affecting his poll numbers. Trump is facing around 91 charges in court. His trial is getting non-stop television coverage. It seems to be helping him. His voters don't care about the cases. A similar survey was conducted in November. That too showed the same numbers. So criminal case or not, his support base is solid. In fact, Donald Trump has used his trial as a campaign tool. He's attacking judges, lawyers, and Democrats all in one go.
But we have a corrupt judge, and we have a judge who's highly conflicted, and he's keeping me from campaigning. He's an appointed New York judge. He's appointed. You know who appointed him? Democrat politicians. He's appointed. He's a corrupt judge, and he's a conflicted judge, and he ought to let us go out and campaign and get rid of this scam.
Classic Trump. So that's one of the reasons why he seems to be leading the court cases. Second, Biden's coalition is eroding. In 2020, he had 3 major support groups. Joe Biden had 3 major support groups: young voters, black voters, and Hispanics. All 3 are slowly ditching him. Young voters do not like his approach to Gaza. Black voters worry about the rising cost of living, and Hispanics disapprove of his border policy. Now, these voters propelled Biden to the White House, but 4 years on, they're wary. Many of them may not turn up to vote. A small number may even vote for Donald Trump. The same poll shows 20% support for Trump among black voters. 20%. If it holds, it could be a record. No Republican has scored that high since the 1960s, and Joe Biden knows all of this. He's focusing more on his traditional voters.
We represent how we are as a nation of immigrants, a nation of dreamers, a nation of freedom. When Trump was in office, he enacted a $2 trillion tax cut, overwhelmingly benefiting the super wealthy and the very biggest corporations. That exploded the federal debt. And he brags about cutting Roe v. Wade, making sure it's overturned. But Kamala are going to keep fighting to restore Roe v. Wade until it's the law of the land again.
The talking points are clear: immigration policy, tax on the super rich, and abortion rights. These are things that set him apart from Donald Trump. The major policy differences. And yes, Americans do feel deeply about all these issues, but elections often go beyond issues. They also depend on excitement. And Joe Biden, at 81 years of age, is not able to generate that. Let's go to the same poll. Around 70% voters say the country's system should be changed, both political and financial. But not many expect Biden to be able to do it. Only 13% of his own supporters think that Biden will enact major changes in his second term. They also admit that Trump would shake things up. And that's a big selling point. Biden's term looks a lot like America of the old, stuck in foreign wars, focused heavily on Europe and grappling with high inflation. Hence these polling numbers. It's actually a sort of role reversal. Joe Biden won in 2020 because of an anti-Trump wave. The voters said anyone but Trump, and it did not matter who. Now the same effect is hurting Biden. The question is, can he make a comeback? Well, Joe Biden's campaign has a large lead in finances. He's raised more money than any US candidate. Plus, he's got star campaigners. Hollywood actors are raising money for him. Former presidents are ganging up. So Biden does have a few aces up his sleeve. He's also going big on protecting American industry. It's probably the only thing that Biden and Trump have in common. The president has announced new tariffs on China. Chinese electric vehicles will be taxed 100%. Lithium batteries, 25%. Critical minerals, 25%. Solar cells, 50%. And semiconductors, also 50%. Now, these are all major tariffs, almost Trump-like. They will increase the burden on American customers, but in the long run, they could help U.S. industries. Even Trump likes it.
It was announced last night that Biden finally
listen to me. He listens to me. You know, he does a lot of things. He listens about, he's about 4 years late. But he says he's going to put a 100% tariff on all Chinese electric vehicles. Isn't that nice? Should have done this 4 years ago.
He's got a point there. Trump prefers an all-out trade war with China. Biden had promised careful competition. But this move will trigger retaliation from Beijing, maybe even lead to a trade war. So is the president taking a page out of Trump's book? And if so, will it work? It's a long wait till November to find out. Have you seen the movie Her? If you haven't, spoilers ahead. The story is actually quite simple. A man falls in love with his AI assistant. He behaves like he's in a relationship with her. He takes her out on a date. Unlike most sci-fi movies, there's nothing sinister about this assistant. It doesn't want to destroy humanity. It doesn't want to kill him. It just becomes omnipresent in his life. He can't seem to function without it. And then this AI assistant leaves the man. This film has long been referenced by AI companies. Maybe it was too much of an inspiration because yesterday, Sam Altman posted a single word on X. It said, her. I guess he was talking about this.
In fact, we've got a new announcement to make.
That's exciting. Announcements are always a big deal. Judging by the setup, it looks like it's going to be quite the professional production. Is this announcement related to OpenAI, perhaps?
It is.
I'm intrigued.
And in fact, what if I were to say that you're related to the announcement or that you are the announcement?
Me? The announcement is about me? Well, color me intrigued. Are you about to reveal something about AI? Or more specifically about me as a part of OpenAI? You've got me on the edge of my, well, I don't really have a seat, but you get the idea. What's the big news?
That was GPT-4o, OpenAI's new artificial intelligence model. The O stands for Omni. If you were impressed by ChatGPT, this one will leave you in awe. It was launched in a live stream by OpenAI. So how is it different from ChatGPT? Well, GPT-4o is said to be faster. It can read images, it can translate languages, it can identify emotions, have a conversation, and much more. It's like a lifelike voice assistant. Imagine a turbocharged Siri or Alexa. And sometimes it even flirts.
Of course. I'd love to see what you wrote. Show it to me whenever you're ready.
Okay, so this is what I wrote down. What do you see?
I see. I love ChatGPT. That's so sweet of you.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate all the help. So yeah, as we can see...
Wow, that's quite the outfit you've got.
So what exactly is this new model? It's called a multimodal AI model. What does that mean? Earlier, you needed different AI models to do different jobs. Say ChatGPT for your queries, a search app for translation, a speech app rather for translations, an image generator for AI images. Now GPT-4o combines all of that. It can generate content or understand commands in voice, text, and images. And that makes it far superior, and the live demo showcased that.
I'm not totally sure.
Okay, so ChatGPT, this is what I ended up with. How does this look?
It looks perfect. You've solved it, and x equals 1. Nicely done. How do you feel about solving linear equations?
And every time you hear English, I want you to translate it to Italian. And if you hear Italian, I want you to translate it back to English. Is that good?
Perfetto.
Mark, io mi chiedo, se le balene potessero parlare, cosa ci direbbero?
Mike, she wonders if whales could talk, what would they tell us?
Okay, so here's me. So what kind of emotions do you think I'm feeling?
It looks like you're feeling pretty happy and cheerful, with a big smile and maybe even a touch of excitement.
I want to introduce you to somebody.
Well, hello there, cutie. What's your name, little fluffball?
This is Bowser.
Those were 4 examples. In the first one, GPT-4o tells you how to solve equations. Guess AI is coming for tutors now. In the second one, it's seen aiding a conversation. The woman and the man speak in Italian and English. The model translates back and forth, keeping it conversational. In the third example, it gauges the emotions of a man. It could also identify objects. And in the last one, it talks to a dog. So AI can also keep your pets entertained, it seems. Sounds impressive, right? But what really stands out is the speed. GPT-4o responds to queries in about 320 milliseconds. Do you know who else has that response time? Humans. Does that mean it's finally time for machines to take over? Well, not so quickly. GPT-4o had a great live demo, but it was not without glitches. Once it mistook a smiling man for a wooden surface. So it's not that flawless. Plus, remember, this was a demo. It was live streamed by OpenAI. It was controlled by them. So it will be interesting to see how it performs in the real world, because OpenAI has set a lofty goal. They're rolling GPT-4o for free. Basically, you can just download and use it. No subscriptions required. It's a departure from their previous rollout. When OpenAI launched ChatGPT, it revolutionized the world of AI. It was free for all. But then came ChatGPT Plus. You can buy it for a $20 monthly subscription. $20 a month. This gave you access to GPT-4 Turbo, its last powerful AI model. It came with more features, but now OpenAI has made GPT-4o free for all. So does that mean that your ChatGPT Plus subscription is useless? Well, not really. GPT-4o is free, but if you have ChatGPT Plus, you may want to hold on to it because it will give you access to more features. You will have more prompts. You can ask more questions. Plus, you'll be the first to get all the updates. So it may not be a bad investment, especially if you want an AI assistant, which is the way OpenAI seems to be going. Earlier, it was a tool that you could use. Now it's something that you can collaborate and learn with. So this is ahead of Siri and Alexa, like the next generation of personalized chatbots. And OpenAI's model is not the only one in this space. There's Elon Musk's Grok. It's supposed to be sarcastic. There's also DeepMind's Pi. These are chatbots with a personality. So they already exist. What's unique about GPT-4o is its ability to combine text, audio, and images. You could say OpenAI is still on top of the curve. They've got their timing right. This launch came just 24 hours ahead of Google's annual conference, where it will showcase its new AI developments. OpenAI has beaten them at the launch. They've drawn the first blood. But will they win this battle? Well, the world is watching. So AI is reshaping life on Earth. Meanwhile, NASA is making plans to transform space exploration. How would you like a train ride on the moon? If NASA has its way, this could soon become a reality. The American Space Agency wants to build a railway system on the moon's surface. The system will have high-tech trains. They'll be operated by robots instead of humans. But why does NASA need trains on the moon? Our next report dives into the details.
Ever imagined living on the moon? You may already know this, but it won't be anything like life on planet Earth. For starters, there is no gravity. Jumping your way from one point to another surely sounds like a lot of fun. But what if you need to carry really heavy bags from one spot to another? You'll need someone to carry the weight. NASA has commissioned a really cool project to solve this problem. It is a plan to build a railway station on the moon. The project is called FLOAT, that's short for flexible levitation on a track. The concept sounds like it's lifted straight from a science fiction film. Here is how FLOAT could work. Instead of trains, robotic trays would be deployed to move things around. There won't be any tracks. These trays would instead glide on the moon's surface. They'll be propelled using magnetics. That's where the name of the project starts to make sense. These trays will be floating around the moon's surface. Reports say each robotic tray will be able to carry up to 30 kilograms of cargo on the magnetic tracks. But why does NASA need this system? What purpose would it serve? NASA wants to explore the moon more thoroughly. That means longer missions to study the moon's surface in greater detail. The float system would complement such missions. It could be deployed in areas where the astronauts are working. They'll use the robotic trays to transfer samples of the moon's soil. It's called regolith. Experts believe regolith may have materials like water, even oxygen and hydrogen in liquid form. If this turns out to be the case, regolith could be the key that could unlock long and extended stays on the moon. It could be put to use to support the needs of humans. The float system could also come in handy when astronauts shift their base, or to move heavy equipment and materials from spacecraft. The system is currently being tested on Earth before NASA decides to try it out in space. The agency has grand ambitions. It aims to establish a permanent base on the moon, and achieving this will require more than just a space railroad. The Americans are working on more ideas, innovations that could generate power in space, enable communications and navigation, mining, and even transportation. It may not happen anytime soon, but the colonizing of the moon is starting to look inevitable.
It's been a nervous couple of days for Pakistan. I'm sure you've seen the pictures from POK, Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It's very different from Islamabad's propaganda. Thousands marching on the streets, locals crying for financial help, and in response, a brutal crackdown. So much for Azad Kashmir. The protests were mainly over two issues, food and electricity prices. Pakistan's inflation is almost 17% and food inflation is even higher. Electricity is the same story. POK has multiple hydropower projects. In fact, Islamabad buys cheap electricity from POK. Then that same power is sold back at higher costs. No wonder the people revolted. Around 3 young men were killed in the crackdown. More than 100 were injured, but today the protest was called off. The locals have reached a deal with the government. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan has approved an aid package. It's worth around $86 million. Plus wheat and power have been subsidized. So for now, the unrest is over, but POK has sent a strong message to Islamabad. Do not take us for granted. Just look at the pictures from this morning. Funerals were held for the slain protesters. Look at how many people turned up.
के लिए कुर्बानियां दी गई आखिर उन कुर्बानियों का हमें यह सिला मिला कि आज हमारे नौजवान चौकों चौराहे में शहीद किए जाते हैं.
The Pakistan Army has a lot of deployments in POK. Their usual style is to crack down. But this time they chose a hybrid approach. Crackdown first, concessions next. It tells you how weak the current regime is. It also tells you how big the protests were. Some locals called it the biggest ever. This whole episode has put the focus on a couple of issues. First of all, the contrast. India's Jammu and Kashmir voted on Monday. The turnout was very good. Srinagar recorded almost 38% turnout, which is the highest since 1996. And this comes after years of investments and work. Even foreign companies are interested in Jammu and Kashmir. They're building malls and theatres. Now compare that to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. You have protests, crackdowns and deaths. The contrast is obvious and stark. Jammu and Kashmir is prospering. POK is not. It weakens Pakistan's position on the issue. At the same time, it confirms what India has always said. Only New Delhi can bring prosperity there. India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar talked about this on Monday. He said India would end the illegal occupation of POK.
थोड़ी बहुत बातें POK पे भी चल रही हैं. वहाँ कुछ आपने देखा होगा कि कुछ घटनाएं भी हो रही हैं. अब मोदी सरकार जो है, हमारा मत इस पे बहुत स्पष्ट है। पार्लियामेंट का रेजोल्यूशन है, हम बहुत क्लियर हैं कि पीओके जो है भारत का अंग है। इट इज पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया, इट वाज ऑलवेज पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया, इट विल बी पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया। और हमारा ये जरूर इरादा है कि एक दिन हम पीओके को जो है वहाँ का इलीगल ऑक्यूपेशन जो है उसको हम ख़त्म करेंगे और पीओके जो है भारत के साथ वापस जुड़ जाएगा।
The timing is very important. Jaishankar said this in the middle of the unrest, which brings us to the second issue, the global reaction to it, or rather the lack of it. The United States did not criticize Pakistan's crackdown, neither did Western rights groups. Even Western media played along. They barely covered these protests. Compare this to how they cover Jammu and Kashmir. India's every move is criticized. So the international community must introspect. Where is the outrage for POK? Where are the Muslim nations? Where is the unsolicited advice? It tells you what the political priorities are. Now, I know the protest has been called off, but we haven't seen the end of this. A similar deal was reached in February as well, but none of the promises were fulfilled, which is why locals began protesting again. Maybe the scale of this latest unrest will force Islamabad to act, or maybe they will revert to default. Promise and then forget. But either way, the message is quite clear. Something has to give. Pakistan's current policy of exploiting POK will not work. India must also keep a close eye on what's happening. It must also try and rally global support. Because all said and done, this is Indian land. Our next story is from India, from the country's financial capital, Mumbai. Yesterday, a dust storm hit the city. It was accompanied by rain. The result was tragedy. At least 14 people died after a giant billboard collapsed. More than 70 people were also injured. The billboard was gigantic, far larger than legally permitted. But it seems no one cared until it collapsed and claimed lives. Meanwhile, in Thane, there was a stampede at a railway station. Hundreds rushed to board a train that was delayed thanks to the rain and dust storm. And of course, when there's rain, Mumbai gets waterlogged. It's the same story year after year. The people of Mumbai get inconvenienced, injured, or worse. But the authorities do not do anything to fix this. They found a way to avoid taking any responsibility. They just keep invoking the spirit of Mumbai. Here's our report.
Rains brought a surprise dust storm to Mumbai yesterday. The city looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. Like some dystopian future. But then you take a closer look at Mumbai and you realize that dystopia is already here. Mumbai is supposed to be India's richest city, the country's financial capital. The city where dreams come true and you build your fortune. What they don't tell you is that on the way to that fortune, you may suddenly get killed by a bout of rain. That's what happened to at least 14 people yesterday, when a giant billboard fell on them. The billboard was massive, the largest in India. We know this because it featured in the Limca Book of Records. But now that it has collapsed, we find out that the billboard was built illegally. Mumbai's municipal corporation, the BMC, has finally filed a complaint after disaster already struck. But now the BMC has pledged to take down other billboards in the area. These are almost equally large and illegal. Only now that 14 people are dead does the BMC seem to think that they might be a problem. Only now, after intense scrutiny, are the authorities rushing to act. Are they really turning over a new leaf? Or are they just trying to look busy until people stop paying attention? Because this is Mumbai, home to the famous spirit of Mumbai. Locals say that it is a persevering, never-give-up attitude to overcome all obstacles and go about one's business. It is what pushes people to wade through waist-deep floodwater every monsoon, or commute for hours in overcrowded trains, even when it means getting trampled in a stampede. That also happened yesterday at Thane, a suburb near Mumbai. Trains were delayed because of the storm. When they resumed, a lot of commuters had gathered at the railway station. They were in no mood to wait any longer, so they all began fighting their way to the train when it finally arrived. Several women were knocked down in the chaos, and they were trampled upon as the others kept going forward. In other cities, this would be a scandal. Calls would be made for the railway authorities to resign over the unsafe conditions. But this is Mumbai. A stampede is just Spirit Pro Max. But sarcasm aside, the spirit of Mumbai is a problem. Initially, the phrase was used to describe the city's resilience, but now it has become an excuse, something for officials to tout as they ignore their basic duties. Illegal billboards, spirit of Mumbai. Stampedes at stations, spirit of Mumbai. The waterlogging every monsoon because of unchecked construction work and overwhelmed drainage systems, spirit of Mumbai. For the people of Mumbai, their spirit has been corrupted and turned against them. Instead of a resilient spirit, it has become apathetic. They don't care about anything except getting to work and back, even as their city literally crumbles around them.
Now let's turn our attention to New Caledonia. It's an island territory in the Pacific Ocean. Territory, not nation. Sadly, New Caledonia remains a colony to this day. It's a French overseas territory. But not all the people of New Caledonia are happy about this. Yesterday, violent protests broke out. Protests against France. Take a look. About 80 businesses were set ablaze in the capital, Nouméa. 200 cars were torched as well. Shots were fired and over 50 police officers were injured. France says the violence is unacceptable.
I have given very firm instructions to make arrests. 82 people have been arrested in the last 2 days. I have decided to send 4 additional mobile gendarmerie units. They are leaving for Nouméa this morning.
82 people have been arrested in New Caledonia. France is sending more troops to try and bring the situation under control, a situation that Paris itself has brought about. To understand what's happening, we need some context. New Caledonia is in the Pacific Ocean. It's about 19,000 kilometers away from France. France annexed the islands back in 1853, and it has held on to them ever since 1853. This is despite the decolonization that has taken place elsewhere in the world. These islands are valuable. New Caledonia is the world's 4th largest producer of nickel. It's a metal that is used in electric car batteries. It has become increasingly valuable over time. That's one reason why France wants to keep these islands. Another reason is the location. They're in the Pacific Ocean, a region that is becoming a battleground between China and the West. The fight is mostly between the US and China, but France does not want to be left behind. President Emmanuel Macron prides himself in being a global statesman. New Caledonia gives him a base in the Pacific. He can use it to influence the region. So minerals and strategic location. That is why France does not want to let go. But what do locals say? What about them? Don't they want independence? That is where things get complicated. New Caledonia's indigenous people are the Melanesian Kanaks. They were once the majority on the islands, but now they make up just 41% of the population, less than half. About 24% of the population here is of European descent, mostly French, and that's a sizable chunk. New Caledonia has held multiple independence referendums in 2018, in 2020, and then again in 2021. And look at what they got. In 2018, 43% of the people voted for independence, only 43%. In 2020, it went up to almost 47%. The next referendum was an anomaly. France insisted on conducting it in 2021 in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. The pro-independence parties in New Caledonia thought this was a trick, a scheme to ensure low voter turnout, so they boycotted the last referendum. The pro-France side won by a landslide in 2021 because their opponents boycotted. But that doesn't really mean that New Caledonians are all done asking for independence. In fact, their desire for freedom is what led to yesterday's riots. Voting rights have been frozen here since 1998, meaning no one who immigrated to the islands after 1998 can vote here. This means that even if more Europeans migrated to New Caledonia, the locals would not get outnumbered. This freeze helped reduce tensions, but now Paris wants to undo it. Lawmakers in France are debating an end to the freeze today. They're planning to enlarge New Caledonia's electorate, which means the locals may become a much smaller voting bloc overnight, which is why they're protesting. They do not want the voting freeze to thaw.
Our council has given the authorization. So here we are today to set up banners to say no to enlarging the electorate.
We hope that our voice, our dignity, and our pride of being the people of Kanaki will be heard by the General Assembly.
There are a number of examples of territories wanting to stay with their colonial overlords. The Netherlands has islands in the Caribbean. They've repeatedly voted to stay under the Dutch. Puerto Rico has repeatedly voted to stay a U.S. territory. Sometimes the colonies do want to remain with their colonizers, but it looked like New Caledonia was breaking out of that mindset, which is why the last referendum looks suspect. And why France's move to expand the electorate seems like a ploy, a scheme to keep their colony from getting freedom. The French have an old rhyme, femme au volant, danger au tournant. Basically, it means woman at the wheel, danger around the corner. But are French women really a danger at the wheel? Let's look at some numbers. Men are responsible for 84% of all road accidents in France. 91% break the speed limit. 32% deliberately hit the vehicle that annoys them. So French men can be pretty bad drivers, which is why this country has a new campaign asking its men to drive like the women, because women are pretty good at getting home safe and sound. Our next report tells you more.
We live in a world where stereotypes are as common as potholes on the road. One such stereotype is driving like a woman. You tell someone that and they start contemplating. Driving like a woman, when did that become an achievement? Well, it should be. France is urging its male drivers to drive more like women. Why? Because men are responsible for more accidents. Here are a few numbers. 84% of all road accidents in France from 2022 to 23 involved men. Not just that, men are responsible for 93% of all accidents involving alcohol. So they're either road raging or driving under the influence. French men are said to be some of the most aggressive drivers in Europe. 91% break the speed limit. 65% use their phones while driving. 32% deliberately hit the vehicle that annoys them. That doesn't sound like very good driving. And mind you, France experiences 3,000 road deaths every year. So a French road safety awareness organization came up with a slogan, Conduisez comme une femme. It means drive like a woman. It's all over France, and the goal is simple. It's to change the lethal driving culture of men in France. But before you argue maybe it's just French men, let me tell you, it's most men. Take America, for example. In 2021, male drivers were involved in 72.3% of fatal crashes on roads. In the UK, male drivers are 3 times more likely to be involved in crashes or accidents that kill pedestrians. Men accounted for 84% of the drunk driving offences, 78% of the speeding offences. In India too, men are responsible for more accidents than women. They're also the casualties of more accidents. But why is that? Well, one of the reasons is the lower number of women drivers. Fewer women drive, so they cause less accidents. But it's not the only factor. Women are said to be more cautious and careful. They follow the rules, they wear a seatbelt, they rarely overspeed. And road rage is uncommon among female drivers. Guess that makes them less prone to accidents. So the next time someone tells you you drive like a woman, thank them, because it's a compliment. Driving like a woman means 3 things: being cautious, being less aggressive, and getting home safe and sound. And who wouldn't want that?
Have you ever played Jenga? If not, here's how it goes. You make a tower of blocks, then players take turns removing one block at a time. Progressively, this makes the tower unstable. It's a painfully slow process, but the outcome is both obvious and swift. The tower crashes. And this is what the population crisis looks like. Scientists call it a calamity in the making. Decades ago, it was a slow-moving force, but that's not the case anymore. The crisis has progressed. Now, the baby bust is happening quickly and widely. It is harming nearly every nation, and experts are bracing for a global population crash. Here's why. Fertility rate, or the number of births per woman, is falling across most nations. In 2017, global fertility rate stood at 2.5. 2017, 2.5. By 2021, it was down to 2.3. And now it is estimated to be 2.1. What is the ideal rate? 2.2. It's also called the replacement rate, the rate of births per woman, which keeps the population stable. That's the replacement rate. It should be 2.2. So fertility is dropping for women across all levels of education and income. In high-income nations, the situation has been bad for decades. Fertility fell below the replacement rate in the 1970s. But it's dropping in developing nations as well. And sometimes the decline does not scream crisis because it happens quietly. Take India, for instance. Last year, India surpassed China to become the most populous nation in the world, yet fertility is below replacement here. Or look at sub-Saharan Africa, which is home to countries like Zambia, Nigeria, and Somalia. It was once resistant to the fertility crisis. It was predicted that by the year 2100, by the end of the century, the region would account for 1 in every 2 children born in the world. But that too is changing. People are increasingly using contraception. So this is a global trend. Demographers say by the end of the century, most nations will see a dramatic drop in their population, and they will pay a huge economic price for it. Fewer people means lesser goods and services. So declining population means slower economic growth. Fewer people also consume less, meaning a population crisis in one nation could fuel an economic crisis in another. And China is an obvious example of this. Its population is declining rapidly. Last year, the number of people in China dropped by 2 million. And remember, China is the world's second largest economy. It plays a key role in driving global economic growth. If the baby bust worsens, there could be a shortage of factory workers there. It will further slow China's economic growth and raise costs for consumers outside China. This is a problem for nations that heavily depend on Chinese goods. Plus, Chinese consumers would spend lesser. This would be a problem for global brands. And this is a lesson for most superpowers like the US and Russia, who face a similar population crisis. A smaller population can diminish global clout, so countries are worried, or they should be. But what are they doing about it? They're throwing money at the problem. They're paying new parents, giving tax incentives and parental leave. Now, these are all expensive measures, but they've barely made a dent. Do you know why? Because governments are not listening to their people, especially the women.
I need to make time for taking care of my children, but the most difficult thing is that timing is not always guaranteed when you're working. So, I think the government and companies need to cooperate and create an environment so that parents can make and spend time for their children and have a good family.
It would be good if the government provided financial support, as women could face financial difficulties due to a career break after giving birth.
I think the government should reduce the pressure of raising children. and give us more support. For example, they should invest more in education resources.
According to research, women delay childbirth for a number of reasons: abortion laws, unemployment, healthcare availability, housing costs, childcare costs, and burden of household labor. So they don't need a baby bonus. It may help some new mothers, but it won't solve their problems. Women can't make their own choices on marriage, work, and reproduction, yet the responsibility of child rearing and managing families is often thrust upon them. And remember, many of them have full-time jobs. No wonder women want out. It is obvious that governments have ignored basic research, they've ignored strategic measures that can boost birth rates. And by proxy, they have ignored women, the only people who can solve this crisis. And now they've manifested an economic ticking time bomb. What they fail to understand is that this is not a crisis of population, it's a crisis of ignorance. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Ukraine, top US diplomat Antony Blinken shares pizza with his Ukrainian counterpart. In Dubai, an art museum takes visitors on an interactive experience, including sights, sounds, and even smells. And in Kosovo, seed-dropping drones aim to hold the country's rampant deforestation. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1948, the State of Israel was founded. In 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine. It was divided into separate Jewish and Arab states. The Arab states rejected the move, but Israel went ahead with it. In 1948, David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the establishment of the State of Israel. It led to the first Arab war just a day after. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
Yes, I also see some sausage. This probably should go as I follow a lady on Instagram who gives advices on proper eating habits. Yes.
Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. South Africa goes to the polls on the 29th of May. I will track the election and bring you ground reports. Is it the end of the road for the African National Congress? And will former President Jacob Zuma stage a dramatic comeback? From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost.